Hiya, in this video I'm going to show you how I made this Punch and Judy Show puzzle box. All my projects start with a few sketches. They're not very good, but they give me an idea of how to bring my ideas to reality. For years this was the only method I used for working out how to make my projects, but now I've finally dragged myself into the 21st century and I'm starting to learn to use an app called Shaper 3D, which is a great design app for the iPad. I can recommend it, but it's a little expensive. It is easy to use though. It has to be if I can learn to use it. Here you can see the final design. It's a great app for working out all the mechanisms and saves a lot of time in development. With the app I produced drawings of every part needed to make the Punch and Judy puzzle box, which you can see here. So the first job is to glue together part of the box. Here I'm gluing together the base and the right hand side. It's important that all the angles are square, and unfortunately my clamps weren't particularly good for this. So as you can see here, there are two little wooden wedges there which I had to put in to make it square. That's the front and base glued together. Now for the front. When the glue is set, the left hand side is temporarily screwed in place. Now for the bottom drawer assembly. This is just butt jointed and glued together. You can see the hole at the back of the drawer there, that's for the dowel lock. This is taped together and then the glue is cleaned off and it's set aside to dry. The same goes for the upper drawer. This is assembled in the same way, and you can just about see a slope on the back of the left hand edge. This is to operate the lid locking mechanism. The small block I'm fitting here has a hole in it which allows the drawer to be locked. This piece forms a guide for one of the locks to run against. These are the dowel holes for the 3 puppets. The lower drawer has been sanded so it slides in and out easily. I've placed a ruler on top of it to give a bit of clearance between that and the drawer shelf, which I'm now fitting. The upper drawer is also sanded and fitted, and then it's placed inside the box to make sure that the dowel holes line up. If it's a bit of a tight fit, then the hole can be opened up to a bigger size. A spring is fitted in the back to make the drawer pop out when it's released. I'm just screwing a magnet to the pivot arm, which forms part of the crock lock. This is the rest of the lock being assembled. And then being glued in position. The position is checked to make sure the magnet lines up with the central hole. And then an extension spring is screwed in place to prevent the lock from releasing if the box is turned upside down. I've also screwed a magnet to the central dowel, as you can see here. Quick check to make sure it works and to make sure that the polarities of the magnets attract each other and don't oppose each other. This block is also part of the crock lock or lower drawer lock, and it's a guide for the locking dowel. It has to be lined up carefully and tested. While the glue was setting, I got on with the rest of the lock. This thin wire forms part of the lock assembly. It's about 1 millimeter thick. Even with the Shaper 3D app, it still took a few attempts to get it the right length. Once the wire is ready, it's all reassembled. Next is a spring for the upper drawer, and it's glued in with some hot glue. At each step the locks are tested and retested to make sure everything is still working okay. This block is part of the upper drawer lock and is screwed onto the end of the Judy puppet dowel. This block is screwed onto the end of the punch dowel and prevents the upper drawer lock from being released until the dowel is moved out of the way. And now the spring block, which I made earlier, is glued in position, and this also forms a shelf for the punch puppet dowel to rest on. So the Judy dowel is prevented from operating by the punch dowel. So now we need something to prevent the punch dowel from working, which is where this block comes in. The block will be attached to a runner, which is tested first to make sure it slides easily. And then it's screwed on and tested again. Once it's working okay, the block and runner are then removed, and the block is unscrewed from the runner. Now the backing for the frills are glued in place, being careful not to glue it to the left hand side as this still needs to be removable for the time being. A small amount of glue is applied to the runner, and then it's glued to another strip of wood on the left hand side. When the glue's set, it's fixed with a screw. Again, it's reassembled and tested. The next job is to fit the backdrop. This is a long slider, which is a lock for the top. As you can see, there's a brass pin in one end of it and a radius on the other end. It's made of pine, which turned out to be a poor choice in the end because sometimes the lock sticks. I need to make it from something heavier, so I'll upgrade it at some point. I'm just gluing on a guide for it, and the piece of paper on the other side is just to give a bit of clearance on it. The runner's removed carefully before the glue sets, just in case it gets locked in. When the glue is set, a strip of wood is screwed on to hold the runner in place. All parts of the lock have been sealed, sanded to a smooth finish, and then waxed to make it work as smoothly as possible. The lock will be released when the drawer is opened. Here you can see how the lot works. This is a method to accurately work out where to drill the hole in the lid. Now it's checked to see if it works okay. It didn't quite work first time, and you might be able to see that the hole is slightly elongated. So it's opened up until it fits nicely. Now we get to the first part of the puzzle. These are the stripes that are fixed to the side of the box. Some of the stripes are laid on the left-hand side in order to give the position of the left-hand stripe guide, which is then glued in place. Once the glue is set, the slider stripe is laid next to it, and then the right-hand guide is glued in place. The slider is then removed before the glue is set in case it gets glued in position. This forms the first part of the puzzle, so a pin is inserted in the end of the slider, and then the end is painted black and reinserted to mark the position of the hole, which is then drilled. At this point, the top is fitted and then glued to the slider. Before the glue has set, the position is checked, and then the pieces are clamped. Two rails are glued to the top of the sides, and this is just to make it look better. I didn't know whether to include anything about the carved figures, as drawing isn't my forte and neither is carving, but I thought perhaps some of you might find the process interesting. I googled a few photographs of Punch and Judy puppets, and they are quite crude, hideous looking things. So mine are in the style of traditional Punch and Judy puppets, but perhaps a little less scary. Front and side profiles were first drawn in Procreate and then printed out and stuck to pieces of limewood, or basswood in the USA. Profiles are then cut out on a scroll saw. And you end up with this. And then it's all down to the carving. And this is only about my third attempt at carving, so it's not a tutorial, it's just the way I carved them. So I'll keep quiet for a minute. I did eventually realise that it's easier to carve them if you stick the dowel in the bottom. That's the carving done. Now for the fun bit, the painting. They were all given a base coat of white to start with. While they were drying, all the black areas were painted. For a backdrop, I googled pantomime backdrop. Pantomimes are very British things. Every Christmas they're staged in theatres up and down the country, and are family-orientated farcical plays based on traditional fairy tales. They also make for a perfect backdrop for a Punch and Judy show. This is the curtain or drapes being painted. And the frills. Now all the paintwork is a little bit too bright and new, and I wanted the Punch and Judy box to have a sort of antique look about it. So everything has been dulled down. I made the mix myself from a wash of 1 part oil paint, burnt umber, to 10 parts of Danish oil.
What's the way to do it? What's the way to do it?
I'll leave Punch, Judy and the crocodile to play for a bit and get on with fitting the backdrop. Everything is reassembled at this point. Again, the mechanisms are all tested to make sure they're working before the left hand side is finally glued into position. The red and white stripes are now painted. If you wanted to simplify the puzzle, then instead of using the strips of wood, you could just use 3 sheets of plywood and just paint the red and white stripes on, and then you'd just simply miss out the first part of the puzzle. This is the first part of the puzzle being tested. And now finally we can glue most of the stripes on. We have to be careful not to glue it against the sliding part of the puzzle. It's time to glue on the front frill. Not easy to say. The 2 side frills are used for positioning. The 2 drawers are going to be lined with purple velvet, and this is the cardboard template that the velvet will be wrapped around before it's placed inside the drawer. Once both drawers are lined, they're then reassembled back into the box. Crocodile is placed in the upper drawer, and fortunately it's a tight fit so it won't fall out if the box is turned upside down. The back panel is test fitted and then painted black and then screwed into position in the box. Now the back panel is finally screwed in place. The two remaining stripes can be glued. The left-hand frill is glued in place, and then when it's completely dry, it's tested to make sure it slides okay. Manual assembly is now taking place, with the shutters being glued in position. And this is the banner, which is made from a piece of lime wood, basswood, and it's been carved by hand. A quick coat of yellow paint and we're ready to put the little printed signs on. These were designed in Photoshop. When the signs are all applied, the banner is glued in position. One final job is to dull down the paint using the antiquing finish that we applied earlier. So that's it finished, and this is what the final job looked like. So that's the Punch and Judy puzzle box. If you fancy having a go at making one yourself, then plans will be available very soon, so watch this space. Cheers!